welcome back to the Power at Work blog for this live blogcast. Let me do that again. Live blogcast. It's harder to say than it seems to be. Very excited to have you here, and very excited to have these two gentlemen back again. They are the only repeat blogcast guests that we have had, other than the folks who show up to talk about jobs and unemployment on the first Friday of every month. They're our first repeat blogcast guests. So we have Don Looney and Glenn Kage Jr., both of whom are from local 2250 of the UAW, the Wentzville facility in Missouri. That was one of the first facilities to go out on strike. We spoke to them not long after the strike began. The UAW strike has been going on for about 4 weeks right now. I'll tell you both, I'll tell the audience and you at the same time, that the prevailing wisdom among folks on Wall Street, I am told, was that the strike was going to last 5 weeks. I don't think that's right. I think that betting is just wrong. I wouldn't put down a bet myself, but it's not looking like it's going to be 5 weeks. So Glenn, Don, very excited to have you here. Thanks for coming back. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, always thank you so much.
Great. And let me just say, Glenn has been striking so hard that he's made himself sick. So he may sound a little bit hoarse to you, but we're going to cover for him, and he'll say what he can say. But at some point, we'll see if he's able to get it out, because he's got the big C, not cancer, COVID. So really glad to have him on the blogcast, even though he's under the weather. So let's hope he didn't get on a picket line. That would be terrible. All right. So I want to be a little bit serious and get a sense of how you both are feeling about the strike right now, how you're feeling about the negotiations. And then in a minute, I'm going to ask you about your coworkers. But just Don, let me start with you. What is your mood around the strike right now and the negotiations? Are you optimistic? Are you frustrated? Are you sick and tired? Are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? Where are you right now?
So in all honesty, I feel like the negotiations are right about where I kind of anticipated they would be. We did this 4 years ago, just with General Motors all the way around. And during that time, we were out 42 days. And when we came back to the table at the end, even though we voted to accept the tentative agreement at that time, a lot of what we wanted in that strike wasn't included in that. And so if 42 days got us a little movement, I kind of anticipated we would need a little more to go for the whole shebang. Like I said, I'm hoping that we can get it all, right? So we are kind of exactly where I anticipated we would be. So I'm not discouraged. I'm just kind of digging my heels in a little further.
Yeah. So maybe resolute. Is that a good word? Resolute?
Yes.
Resolved. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that's the right word. Glenn, how are you feeling about the strike right now? Optimistic, angry, frustrated, pessimistic, enthusiastic, patient? How would you describe your mood right now?
Well, I'm almost always optimistic, and this is no different. I have to say that the way the International Union is handling the strike by walking out Ford last night, they went to the table yesterday, sat down with Ford. Ford put down the same agreement that they had offered last week. And they said, why are we wasting, the international president, Sean Fain, said, why are we wasting our time with this? They got up and walked out. And as soon as they walked out, they shut down the Ford plant, with the most profitable Ford plant in North America. And it sent a very clear message to Ford: we aren't playing. And so I'm optimistic. And one thing I would like to say, Don's right. We were on strike for 42 days last time, 4 years ago. I was the president back then. The information we are getting out, the communication that we're having with the international leadership is above and beyond anything that we've ever witnessed during a strike. And I've been around a long time, obviously. But 4 years ago, we would not get anything. And if we even talked about the strike, like on a blogcast like this, I can tell you with firsthand knowledge that I would be getting a call from the international leadership saying, who the hell do you think you are talking about the strike like that? So no, This is a lot better. And, we continue to keep doing what we do, or we're going to hold the line and strike until we get a fair and equitable contract.
Well, let me ask you about your coworkers then. Don, let me start with you on this. lots of people walking the line with you out there. The Wentzville
Yes.
plant is a big plant.
Yeah.
How many workers in that plant?
So the last
All the
number was
shifts, all the
all the
shifts taken
shifts. Yeah.
together.
So total, we got 3,700 members, north of 3,700 that are considered permanent full-time workers. I think it's about 4,000 altogether.
Yeah. So tell me, you've been talking to folks, you've been walking
Yeah.
picket with folks, you've been going to meetings with folks, probably having meals with folks. What's the mood among your coworkers? And are you beginning to see any kind of splits emerging? Are there folks who would like to get back? Are there folks who are more militant and want to do more? What are the conversations like?
So it's kind of a mix of all of it. At this point, the coverage that we're getting in the media is helpful, and the public sentiment is tenfold what it was last time, right? Like, people are on the side of the workers all across the nation. People are getting energized because we're getting all kinds of folks stopping by the picket line. We've got politicians, big and small, local and national, stopping by. The DNC brought a delegation out, and they walked the picket line with groups for about an hour last week because they were here in St. Louis. Again, in this small town here, a lot of the local businesses are always, people are always out there visiting. So that's helping keep the morale up. As the offers keep getting publicized from the companies, people are seeing that this strategy, which we were all kind of shaky and wondering about at first, is kind of working. Okay. And, last night he showed that we're saving the big guns for later, right? We'll pull the big guns out when we need to, but we're going to start and we're going to show them that we're serious. And so as we continue to escalate it, the morale for the strike itself is increasing. At this point, though, the challenge that we're having is that, we're all a family, right? And so when you spend too much time repeatedly with your siblings, it kind of becomes uncomfortable. So, but that's internal stuff. Like, we'll work through those things, right? But that's really where we are right now. Like, everybody's digging in and they're in for the fight. We made some changes to our constitution that allow us a little more flexibility so we can, fight harder and still be able to take care of our families, and we're not living hand to mouth. We're already living check to check, right? So we don't want to be living hand to mouth. But the morale is good. Like I said, we're spending a lot of time with each other, and I think we're starting to see the effects from that.
Can I just clarify? I have a brother, he's in Missouri, and I don't want him to feel like that if we spend a lot of time together, that I'm going to get upset with him. So, Paul, I love you and happy to spend as much time as you'd like together. Don does not speak for me on that. Glenn, tell me, you're talking to folks. You've been the president. You've been political director. You've been in this organization for a long time. You've got a lot of relationships. What are people saying to you when there's not anybody else around, when it's just you and them, and you're sort of the father confessor?
Well, there's some people that have a little bit of concern. I'm not going to lie. But that's normal. We've been out on strike now. We're entering our fourth week, and some of the people are getting a little bit hungry. And here's the thing to think about. The starting wage in there is $16.78 an hour. It's less than $17 an hour. People can barely afford to make ends meet for $17 an hour, let alone try to save up to endure a long strike. And those are the people that are kind of struggling a little bit. And some of them are coming up and asking quite often, what am I hearing? How much longer is it going to last? I heard the same thing 4 years ago. And we're kind of at the point now where you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. You might as well go in and get everything that you can out of it and make it worth the time that you've been off. Don made an excellent point when he brought it up about 4 years ago. We endured a 42-day strike. And the benefit from that strike was not very good. And General Motors claims that they lost over $3 billion in those 40 days of strike. Mm-hmm. When you put it into the perspective, they could have probably paid or covered all the ask that the UAW were requesting in our contract and came out pretty darn close to where they were without losing a dime of product inventory.
That's a fact.
Yeah. There's the losses that the companies are withstanding have been limited somewhat by the stand-up strike strategy. There's only now, I think, 34 or 35,000 members out on strike out of a total of 150,000 across the three companies, and it's still a minority of the facilities that have closed down. And that Kentucky facility, Glenn, that you were talking about, the Ford facility that President Fain announced was going to go out on strike last night after that unsuccessful negotiation session with Ford. That's the first truck facility, I believe, the first truck facility, which is where a lot of the profitability of the companies comes in. And so that was, Don, you mentioned before that the union hasn't brought out the big guns. That's sort of the first big gun that I've heard fired in this strike. That was not that Wentzville isn't important and the parts plants aren't important. They're all important, and every one of them is costing the company money. But you take $24 billion out of somebody's revenue stream, $24 billion over a year, they're going to really feel it. I'm dying to know, really eager to know, because this strike has become a way for politicians to prove themselves, or at least to make a showing that they're proving themselves to working people and that they're on the side of working people in the middle class. So Don, and then I'll ask you, Glenn, have politicians been showing up at the picket line? You mentioned the DNC showed up. They must have been in town for a meeting. Yeah. But are other politicians showing up? And in particular, are there any, because you're very active in politics. Both of you are very active in politics. In fact, Don, you hold a local political position, right, with the county Democratic Party.
Yes.
So are there politicians that have shown up and you said, yeah, no doubt about it, that woman, that person's been with us. They've been with us every step of the way, knew they were going to be here, glad to see them, pat them on the back, here's your picket sign. And then are there other politicians who've shown up? It's like, who's that guy? Who is she?
So
how come we've never heard of you before? Or it's like, wait a minute, you are here on a picket line? So I want to hear about people in those two categories, the obviously, and then the wait a minute, what?
So here's the thing. When you're talking about politics at a local union level, right? We know who our people are, right? We know what legislators and candidates are. We know what legislators are currently who are supportive of us, right? We keep track of that stuff. This is the kind of stuff that Glenn and I kind of nerd out on, right? If we have a conversation about it, we could spend hours going on about which ones and how they voted and, what they said 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So just putting it bluntly, like, we can spot the fakes, okay? And the ones that we have relationships, those are the ones that are making the grandiose approaches. Those are the ones who, may be alerting the media, or they're bringing somewhat of an entourage and things of that nature, right? They're all showing up, but the ones who haven't been in our favor, for instance, there was a certain senator who showed up on the picket line for a few hours.
We don't have to mention Senator Hawley's name. Oops.
I found out locally here through some of my connections that he actually contacted a local elected official and had them escort him to the line, and he never really made contact with us in person. So really? That's the kind of stuff. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that we're seeing right now. So yes, they're showing up because they want the photo op, they want to try to politicize it. But just like I tell all of our brothers and sisters on the picket line and on the assembly line, Walter Reuther said the ballot box is directly connected to the bread box, right? So these are the people who are either helping you feed your family or they're doing something not to do that. And that's why we got to be involved. But so again, they're all showing up, but I don't think myself or Glenn is ever shy to tell anyone, you or anyone else, who the fakes are. Like, we can spot them a mile away.
So Glenn, what do you do when one of those politicians who voted for right to work, who votes against worker protections, who votes against job training funding, who doesn't support unions, didn't show up for the endorsement meetings? What do you do when they show up on the picket line and they got their camera person ready to go and they've got a local reporter with them and they're ready for their posed picture with people carrying picket signs? What do you do?
Right. Well, the thing is, I would remind them that in the state of Missouri, we voted against right to work. We're the only state in the country that has voted against right to work and defeated it at the polls twice. We defeated it in 1978 which is where I cut my teeth knocking on doors in politics. And then we defeated it again in 2018. And when we defeated it in 2018, 65, 67% of the citizens of Missouri voted against Proposition A, which was right to work. I would remind, I'll do it this way because it's kind of funny. I would tell Senator Hawley, congratulations on being a senator. It was obviously the will of the people that you were elected over Claire McCaskill. And since you're all about honoring the will of the people and you're out here honoring our picket line, we can now count on you to honor the will of the people and never support right to work again, right? And just see what he says about that, because I've used that line in my trips to Jeff City. And typically the pushback I get from whoever I'm talking to, they say something like, well, you know, it was the will of the people to elect me, and they know my position on right to work, so they voted for me, knowing I opposed right to work. I don't really think they knew what right to work was about. That is literally almost word for word what I have been told on trips to Jeff City. So no, I would have had an enjoyable conversation with Senator Hawley. I would have asked him about the PRO Act, if he's out here supporting us and supporting our strike. Where is he? Can we count on him to help co-sponsor the PRO Act, which is protect the right to organize in the U.S. Senate? You know, if he wants to be pro-labor, look, we're nonpartisan. We support whoever's going to support us, but 99% of the time, it doesn't come from the right side of the legislatures.
Yeah, I think I want to pick up on the point that Don made earlier. Is there is overwhelming popular support for the UAW in this strike, for unions generally, for the right to organize, for workers fighting to improve the quality of their lives. Overwhelming support. So when I see someone like, you know, any conservative, anti-union, pro-business politician showing up at a picket line, that's an indication of the amount of power that workers now have and the amount of popularity that worker power now has, right? Because those politicians feel like they've got to be on the right side of the issue, because this is not a 51-49 issue. This is a 65-35, 75-25, 80-20 issue for the American people. They're with the UAW, they're with the labor movement. They want to see more people getting organized. So those politicians don't want to be on the 20, they want to be on the side of the 80. And so they show up. Now, I think that we're all going to see that they're not going to follow through on that. Most of them, the more conservative folks, you know, the more progressive politicians who are coming out, it's just who they are. It's what they support. Although I think there's been a real meaningful educational process for a lot of folks who are moderate and liberal, who maybe have not spent enough time thinking about trade union issues, have not spent enough time thinking about economic issues. They're caught up in fighting about other issues that are also very important, but they have not been in the fight with the labor movement. They're supportive from a distance. They'll vote the right way, but they haven't been in the fight. So in a sense, this strike is giving them a chance to learn and to experience and to talk face to face with workers who are showing a lot of courage and really fighting for their families, fighting for their communities.
No, you're absolutely correct. Sorry, Don. One thing I want to point out, though, is 4 years ago, we did not have this kind of a turnout from national politicians. The local politicians, our friends and neighbors, they came out in full support of us, and they've come out in full support of us again this year. Mm-hmm. I think the key is the social media presence that the UAW is taking in this strike compared to 4 years ago. They're just doing a tremendous job at educating the general public, and I think that's one of the things that's shoring up the support for the pickets and the strike. But it's also one of the things that is encouraging these politicians to take a strong stand and come out and walk with us.
Yeah, I agree with that. Don, go ahead, Don.
Well, I was just going to say a lot of that support comes from, I mean, we've made our talking points. I don't know who's in charge of the marketing for the UAW right now, but they've made the talking points plain and simple. I mean, people are understanding what, you know, COLA, that's a union term, right? Just like prevailing wage. But now a lot of these terms are coming becoming, more common in the marketplace and just in general, saying fair pay. Well, you don't feel like you're getting paid fairly now. And so, with the comparison to the CEO salaries and the stock buybacks and things of that, I think we're doing a really good job of putting out there why it is we're fighting and what exactly is we're fighting for and what's unfair about it. And I mean, those things are just undeniable. So, I mean, I wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of that argument. Unfortunately, I'm a union member and I'm here and I'm on the right side, but I wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of that argument, especially if I had some extreme or lofty political aspirations, because people won't forget that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. There's real populism and then there's false populism. And this is a really good way to tell the difference between those two things. All right, let me ask you both two questions that I asked you last time. We're not going to compare the tapes to see if you give the same answer. We're just curious about whether or not your thinking has evolved on these issues. And Glenn, let me start with you. How much longer do you think this goes? And what do you think the membership has to have to get not just like a 51% ratification vote, but like a 65% ratification vote that shows that the union is really coming together around the contract? So how long is it going to take? And what do you think the membership needs to have?
I think we're going to be out for a few more weeks. I would have to think that it's going to be at least a few more weeks. And in order for our membership to come together, the International, one thing they did do is they set the expectations very high for this contract. And I think the members will not settle for anything less than 30 to 35% pay increases, more balance between work time and family time. And then I would love to see health care for retirees, people who retire that were hired after 2009, as well as some pension, but I don't even hear them talking about that anymore. So I think that it's going to be a substantial pay increase and a better balance between work and life.
What do you think, Don?
Well, so the first question, because I think that this membership really wants all of those things that we're asking for, I'm preparing myself and my family to quote unquote cancel Christmas, right? Like I just don't. I'm preparing.
Wait, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Are you saying that you think this strike could go through Christmas, or are you saying that it could go so long that maybe there's not going to be a bunch of spare cash to spend on Christmas presents?
Right. So
wait, which one? Wait, which one? Because that would be a big thing to say. You think this is going through the end of December? You think it might go into the beginning of December, the middle of December? What do you think?
I'm saying December. I'm saying December. I won't say the end of the year, but I do feel like into December. I think after the Thanksgiving holiday is probably when we'll really start to make an impact, because we haven't really, we got to 20% over 4 years as far as the numbers go right now, right? But like Glenn said, I think our members would be willing to accept 30 to 35% over that 4 years. But that initial bump when we go back has to be significant. And I don't think that these companies are in that place yet to where they're ready to give that up. And what we would accept, I'm still going to go with my answer from last time, right? I want us to hold out for all of it, because there are so many members that, they fall in so many of those subsects and subgroups of those things that we're asking for, right? If it's not us, it could be a parent, because a lot of us are second and third generation UAW members, parents who are living off the retiree salaries and things of that nature. So yeah, I see movement. I see them going to that place, or they're talking like they want to give things. But I just don't feel like with the press that they're putting out, I don't see them moving closer to what our demands are at this point in time yet. So I think it's going to take a little more time.
All right, so let me go. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not with you on the Christmas part, but I'll give you the outsider's take, interested outsider's take on where I think it's going to go, and you all know better than I do. So take this with not a grain of salt, but a handful of salt. I was quoted as saying that I thought I would be surprised if the strike lasted until November. I'm sorry, until Thanksgiving. I would be surprised if the strike lasted until Thanksgiving, but I also said I wouldn't bet that it would end before Thanksgiving, because I think the distance between the two parties is still pretty significant. There are some meaningful differences on the core economic issues that have not been addressed. And I've been sort of surprised that I haven't seen more movement on those issues. You know, the big breakthrough last week was General Motors agreeing that they would include the workers at the General Motors joint venture battery factories in the master agreement, which is a gigantic breakthrough, a critically important breakthrough. And that was the reason why President Fain and the leadership didn't expand the strike last week. But you didn't hear him talk about lots and lots of progress on wages, on the tiers, on temporary workers. There's been a lot of progress since the beginning, but I don't hear a lot of progress being made in the last week or two. Again, I'm not at the bargaining table. You all are much better plugged in than I am to what's happening. So I think that it's certainly going to be at least a couple more weeks, maybe 3. But I think it's not out of the question that we get to Thanksgiving and the strike is either wrapping up or still going on. So I'm giving a broad range because I don't like to be wrong. Let's be honest. So I'm going to give a broad range. But go ahead.
So here's the thing: the unique part about this is that we're dealing with 3 companies at once here. You know, it's not just one, and then we go into pattern bargaining where the other 2 kind of do the best they can to meet where the first one meet. Like we're attacking all 3 of them at once, and you know, it wouldn't be in my mind, right? And I'm very imaginative, you know what I'm saying? But I imagine that you know, the bargainers for those corporations or the CEOs are having meetings after the meetings, after they sit down with our people, and they're going back and referring, you know, trying to encourage each other not to crack or not to fold, right? Like that's the way that I see this happening in my mind. And so with it being this way, where we're attacking all 3 of them at once, you know, I think that it's going to be a big game of chicken. And the sad part is that, you know, it's the lives of my coworkers, my brothers and sisters, and, you know, on the line that are the bargaining chips in all of this. And that's unfortunate. But those people, you know, on their side at the table, they're not feeling the same pressure we have. You know, those bonuses and buybacks are going to take care of them for the next couple of months, right? It's us that's feeling the pinch here. So to quote an old cliche, we say, you know, on the labor line when we're striking, you know, one day longer, one day stronger. You know, we just got to hold out.
Well, let's hope the membership feels that way, continues to feel that way. I get the sense, not just from talking to you guys, but from other conversations, that most of the membership, maybe a large percentage of the membership, is feeling the way you are, which is you went into it knowing it was going to be hard. The union was really ambitious, and you knew it was going to take a while to get the companies to move, and they have moved, and that's great credit to the UAW. The strategy is working, but it's got a lot more work to do in order to get us there. Don Looney, Glenn Kage Jr., joining us here on the blog. You can find Don on TikTok as Mr. Don Looney. You can find him as Telecom Don on Twitter. Glenn, you can find him as Labor Front on TikTok. You can find him as Glenn Kage Jr. on Twitter. These guys are fantastic. They really know what's going on with their fellow members. What a privilege it is for us to be able to hear from you about what's going on the strike. People hear from me about this stuff all the time. They're sick of hearing from me. They're delighted to hear from you. So Don and Glenn, thanks for being here. Glenn, get well soon. We'll see everybody on the blog again very soon. Thanks.
Thanks again, Seth.
Take care.